Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The sentiments expressed in this tweet, I'm actually seeing it surprisingly often. This is from James, who writes, I'm so fed up with it all the lies and the EU bashing. Please just leave and fall on your face hard and don't come back. We're not interested. Go and stay away. The UK's attitude to EU, and especially to Germany, is abhorrent. Just leave. We don't want you. That's not fair, is it? Because you can't say the UK's attitude to the EU and Germany. You can say some elements within the UK's attitude, or you could even talk about the right-wing media, or if you must, you could talk about the sort of right-wing politics and some left-wing politics. But I'm not part of that, mate, although I register your unhappiness. Speaking of registering things, an astonishing response yesterday to our chat with Matthew Collins from Hope Not Hate. Matthew was telling us the story of how Robbie Mullen, a young man who had fallen into the clutches of a neo-Nazi group, risked his, I think you could say, life to inform Hope Not Hate and subsequently the police on a plan by a man with whom he consorted to murder a Labour MP. That man is now in prison. The Nazi who plotted to murder an MP is in prison, and there is one man to thank. That man is Robbie Mullen, and Matthew told us a story yesterday. We will, I hope, be catching up with Robbie, but he's having a well-earned holiday at the moment. Rosie Cooper MP spoke in Parliament yesterday. She was the MP targeted, and it was the information that Robbie provided to Hope Not Hate that meant the neo-Nazi National Action Gang was smashed. Okay? And today they're trying to raise some more money to send Robbie into schools to talk to young people about the dangers of falling into far-right factions and about the horrors to which it can lead. Therefore, I would like to take a moment to urge you to donate. It is at the GoFundMe, or you can go to my Twitter account. You can have a look. I can't believe I'm doing this in April 2019 in my beloved United Kingdom. Good grief. What did we used to do in the olden days? We used to play Beat the Sweet. Do you remember that? I used to take phone calls from people who had to try to guess what sweet I was eating. And I could only answer questions with the word yes or no. I wasn't allowed to provide any other information. So you might say, is it chewy? And if it was a Murray mint or something like that, I'd be difficult, because like a bonbon, is that chewy? But anyway, it was a great game. That's what we actually used to do that, live on the radio. So simple were those times. Now, I'm sitting here at 6 minutes after 11. I am reminding you that a Nazi who plotted to murder an MP is in prison as a result of the bravery of a young man who'd actually fallen into the clutches of a neo-Nazi gang. And I am asking you to help the people that helped him raise money to continue their work, their crusading work, in the UK in 2019. My goodness me. It puts Caroline's comments earlier from Whetstone into context, doesn't it, about her fears of the rise of the far right. If you are fearing the rise of the far right, my suggestion would be don't appease them by denying democracy and pretending that anybody voted for a no-deal Brexit. If you fear the rise of the far right, get yourself over there now. Get yourself onto this GoFundMe page. I think you just search, well, you either go to my Twitter feed and find a link, or you just go to GoFundMe.com and stopping the next Nazi terror plot. I think my name's on there as well. It's up to £4,325. It'd be nice if we could hit 10 grand by the end of the show. 03456. No, why am I giving you the number? Go to @MrJamesOP on Twitter and have a look at that. Seriously, we should stop and pause there, shouldn't we, for a moment? What are you doing? What do you do at work today, Dad? Oh, I had to put a shout out to the people who were fighting the Nazis, darling. What Nazis, Dad? In Britain in 2019. Don't we just ignore them? No, we can't, sweetheart, because one of them just got jailed for trying to kill an MP. One of them succeeded in killing an MP hours after that disgusting Breaking Point poster was unveiled. Sometimes you've got to pause, because it's like when Grandma comes to visit and she notices how much the children have grown, but you don't notice because it's happening incrementally in front of you every day. Sometimes you've got to pause And remember that kid used to be 1 foot tall and is now 4 foot tall. That's a massive, massive change. You just haven't noticed it because you see them every day. I'm sitting here now, live on LBC, promoting an organisation that is fighting Nazis. Nazis who had plotted to kill a democratically elected MP in Britain in 2019. Chuck them a few quid, eh? I want to talk about the seaside. Before that, actually, I've had Tony on hold for ages. He's probably fallen asleep. Let me see if he's there. Tony is in Wimbledon. Tony, are you still with us?
I'm still with us.
It's a goddamn miracle. What would you like to say, Tony?
I've just been listening to you since this whole thing has been going on, and I cease to be even amazed with what I've just heard with regard to the Guardian article.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will just sort of say, we've come up against a very unusual set of circumstances. We've seen Parliament at times seem like it's not effective, but the one thing I believe at the end of the day is that we've got to allow our parliamentarians and the parliamentary process to go through its processes to whittle us down to what we can effectively work out and go forward with the relationship on the EU.
Isn't that a perfect illustration of everything? That the people who said we had to leave the European Union because our Parliament didn't have any power are literally now whining about Parliament having too much power.
Yes, and I think what people have got to remember at the end of the day is that it's Parliament. If we allow anything else other than Parliament, the Prime Minister, to sort of be at the helm of these things, then we're looking at something. When I read the articles in The Guardian, it worries me deeply as to what exactly is going on in this country.
Who's putting the fuel in the engine of these ideas? We just don't know who's paying for it. It's incredible.
Well, this is disturbing, and I think that as we go through this process of decoupling from a direct membership, a full membership of the EU, I hope equally as well that our Prime Minister and the politicians seriously do give some time to look at what exactly has gone on and try and learn from it for the future, because we've got a process where we vote.
So what do we end up with then? Theresa May gets something through Parliament, whether it is with Jeremy Corbyn's help or not, and then we have a referendum on either that or revoking, or do we? What do you have on the ballot paper, or do you not want a referendum?
I think the decision is pretty clear. I know there's a lot of limbo over it all, but the people have voted that they ultimately do not want to be in the EU. I think the one thing that I'm glad it's slowly becoming more and more apparent, despite it being very hard for some people to understand, is that we have to, just like we graduated into the membership that we have now with the EU, we can't just jump out of this. We're not in like a war situation.
No, but I see this is
walk away.
No, I hear you, but
yes,
accept that, and I'm going to try to prove this to you. That claim that we know people voted to leave the EU is not true. That's what's really ugly about the continuing reductivism of this debate. Now the claim that no deal is the only way, and was always the only way, in which Brexit could be delivered. I've already shown you that Sun editorial from October 2016, categorically stating that the only circumstances in which we'd have to leave the single market would be if the EU forced us out in a fit of pique, as opposed to the truth, which is we will have to leave the single market because of the indivisibility of the four freedoms. And it gets worse. There's a brilliant fellow on Twitter. He tweets under the name Steve Analyst. You may remember him providing an American perspective on this very soon after the referendum result came in, and he's done it together. He's done it again. He's put together an astonishing thread of clips and evidence of why this talk of no deal somehow becoming the same as, quotes, Brexit is so dangerous. I tweeted it from my account this morning, but I really would draw your attention to some elements of it, and I'm going to do so now, because listen to these campaigners pre-referendum, and bearing in mind that you're now being told that you voted for no deal, right? That's what you're being told by these people. And I know this is a really tricky thing for me to do, because if you in your mind are now convinced that you did vote for no deal, I can't really do this without being a bit rude to you, and I don't want to be a bit rude to you. But why are they spending? Why are they spending all this money filling up Facebook feeds with these suggestions without disclosing where the money has come from? Just think about that. Here is Liam Fox.
Legally, under the Lisbon Treaty, if we decide to leave the European Union is required by law to enter into a negotiation with us about extricating ourselves, including offering us a trade agreement. So it's already written in to the Lisbon Treaty that should we decide to go, they have obligations. We are not like Switzerland, a country already outside. We're already inside the single market. They have obligations to us not to impose trade tariffs or barriers that don't already exist. So it makes a very big difference to the dynamic of the debate when that point is made loud and clear.
I have no comment to add to that. That man is still in the cabinet. He is Secretary of State for International Trade. Turns out I do have a comment to add to it after all, but you knew that that wasn't true when I said it. That's incredible, right? Essentially positing the notion that it would be illegal for us to leave without a deal because of the Lisbon Treaty. Now, people like Liam Fox are claiming that you voted to leave without a deal. People who told you that it would be illegal and impossible prior to June 2016 are now saying, and it's not even the opposite. You need a stronger word than polar. It's not even the polar opposite. It's like a whole different cake. But there it is. Would you like to hear from a man still considered by many to be somehow the respectable face of Brexit and the one that actually did understand stuff, and it was just a minor aberration when he suggested that the country had had enough of experts? Yes, Michael Gove.
Britain is in a unique position. I should say that other countries which are outside the European Union but benefit from this free trade have faster growth rates than many Eurozone countries, but those countries tend to have significantly smaller populations than our own. More than that, as I pointed out in my speech, European Union nations sell more to us than we sell to them. Why would they wish to cut off their nose to spite their face? And even if there were an EU politician bent on that act of economic self-harm, do we really believe that in Germany, that car workers would accept losing jobs as the price of the vanity of a particular leader? Do we really believe that a French president or prime minister would deliberately seek to restrict French farmers' access to our markets? I don't believe that's credible.
And I can see why as well, because it makes sense when you put it like that. Of course, it doesn't make any sense at all now that reality is bitten, but these are the people, or not so much in Gove's case, actually, but people saying we should leave with no deal are on the same side of the argument as Gove, who claimed there that it would be perfectly easy to have full access to the single market without being bound by any of the regulations. They were just wrong. Let's not call them liars today, or shysters, or charlatans. Let's just call them wrong. So how can they now be claiming that you knowingly voted for all the stuff they told you that they've turned out to have been horribly wrong about? It gets better. I've got David Davis and Jacob Rees-Mogg after this.
Those of us on my side of the argument are quite clear in our minds. The access to the European market will be maintained, and access to other markets around the world will be increased. That's really much of the argument for leave.
And still they go on. And then, of course, the king of the no deal, Jacob Rees-Mogg, I shall share with you his thoughts on Article 50 preventing any economic shock in the case of the UK crashing out. I don't know if thoughts is quite the right word. Burblings is probably better. I'll play you that after this. So if I say no deal, who is the British politician who springs most readily to mind? It's probably Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has insisted that the economic damage would probably be over after 50 years and that we all voted for it anyway. This guy.
But I also want to come to your main point, and that is on how we trade in future. Crucially, there's Article 50 on the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union, which sets out how we leave and the terms we would get. And there's a very good report by the House of Lords committee that looks into this, saying they've looked back at how that article came into the treaties. And the whole purpose of it was to avoid an economic shock for both sides if somebody left.
How's that working out? Because if you cast your vote based on his inputs and insights, it turns out he was wrong. So how can you not have another vote? Answer, I don't know. Betrayal? Honour the referendum? Yeah, the one they cheated to win? Still don't know where £8 million came from in the case of the Leave EU funding. This is Britain. I'm raising money for people fighting Nazis today. Fighting actual Nazis. And a so-called referendum result built on criminality is something we're supposed to honour? In part, we've heard from sensible, nice people. In part, we have to, quotes, honour, end quotes it, because of fear of what the fascists might do. I'm already raising money for people who fight Nazis. Man alive. Mark's in Nottingham. Mark, what do you reckon?
Morning, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
It's massively consuming. All this stuff is. I've got my 7-year-old daughter walking around the house trying to pass a motion on what breakfast cereal she wants, and then declaring whether the eyes or the nose have it.
There's a little kid on Twitter last night going, "Order!" It was actually a sort of little oasis of sweetness in a sea of nonsense.
Exactly. What I want to say is, I voted to leave, sure. And all this talk about a second referendum or general election, I think to have a general election, I think, would be nonsense now, I believe. But to have a second referendum would make sense, but on the proviso that cancelling Brexit was not on the ballot paper. I think to cancel Brexit on the ballot paper would have irreparable consequences for generations to come.
Why did you vote leave?
I voted leave, not because I saw some advert on Facebook.
Why didn't you vote leave? Why did you vote leave?
Yeah, I don't like the thought of the EU.
Right, see, that's why we need another referendum, because your utterly unbased feelings shouldn't be the reason why we do something stupid. You don't like the thought of the EU.
No, I don't.
So what is your thought of the EU?
Well, I think it should be done for... I like the EU for trade and travel, and I think that should be it. You
can't trade without laws.
No, I get what you're saying.
I get what you're saying. It's not an exchange, this. You just said something that was, with respect, really silly. You can't trade without laws.
Okay.
So the minute we become part of a trading bloc, we agree to abide by the same laws. So we can leave that trading bloc, and then we don't have to abide by the same laws, but then you're not doing what you said you wanted to do, which is be part of the European Union for trade.
I don't think that the EU respects other people, countries, cultures and values that's specific to them, personally.
Right, example?
I was speaking to, when I went to Vienna just before Christmas, I was speaking to somebody in Vienna, and they were saying that they don't feel like that their values of what they believe is right and what our values of what we believe is right is aligned.
Example? Which values?
So when I was speaking to business people, they were saying that they hated the thought of free movement of people. But
how many business people told you they hated free movement of labour?
I was speaking to 3 different businesses.
And how does that disagree with our values?
In our country don't agree with that either, is what I'm saying to you, but some people do.
But that's agreement. That's agreement and disagreement. That's not the European Union not reflecting our values. And to be fair, you can't really cite another member country to back up your points for wanting to leave.
No, okay. No, fair enough. What I wanted to say to you...
No, mate. We're looking at what you... No. We're looking at what you've already said. Yes, I know you did, and your reasons for not wanting a second referendum are the most important element of your contribution. And your reasons so far...
democratic behind it...
But I'm examining the reason for your vote, and that's crucial to understanding why you don't want another referendum. And so far you've told me that you don't like the thought of the European Union because you met someone in Austria who said something.
No, that's not the reason why I don't like the thought of it. There's lots of reasons why I don't like the thought.
Well, let's run through them then.
Okay, so I don't like the thought that somebody somewhere else is having a say in what we can and can't do in this country.
Right. You realise we're in that parliament as well?
Yes.
And that is something you can vote to elect the people who are there representing your interests?
No, I understand.
And if you want to trade within that bloc, it needs to have rules in place, and it would be quite foolish not to take up the opportunity to help make those rules, right?
Yeah. No,
so you don't like the rules, but therefore you want to remove...
on a European level than it is on a domestic level.
So you want to remove your country from the role of rule-making and put it instead entirely in the position of rule-taking, while telling yourself that you're somehow taking back control.
No.
Well, try again then.
No, because obviously it depends whether you think whether you're going to be rule-making or rule-taking.
No, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I think. If we are members of the European Commission, if we elect MEPs to the European Parliament, we are an integral part of the rule-making process. If we want to trade with that bloc, if we want a free trade agreement with it, we will have to abide by almost all of those rules. And you're saying we would somehow be more independent and or free by surrendering our right to help make the rules that we have to obey. I'm just wondering if you could talk me through the logic in that. And that, of course, was the man who wants no Remain option on the second referendum ballot, bless him. Warren's in Wigton in Cumbria. Warren, what would you like to say?
I am indeed, and good morning from the Lake District.
Hello.
Thanks.
Hello, Lake District.
Thank you. First thing, I'd like to thank you. Your speech that you made in London changed my mind because you didn't stigmatise me.
Oh.
You didn't say I'd done the wrong thing. You blamed it on the other people.
Yes.
And you made me feel a lot better about myself.
Blimey.
For voting leave.
Thank you,
yes,
mate.
I am one of the cursed ones. I would like to go in short detail, if I might,
yes,
the reasons why I voted leave. Well, I can probably tell from my accent I am originally from the black country.
Yes, I can.
Poor education, working class. Nobody gave a damn about me. Never stood a chance. Thank you, Margaret Thatcher. We listen to working class people, accents similar to myself and northern accents, listened to slogans. It's easier. We cannot get into the finite details of Brexit and its implications. Article 24, Article 50, can't understand this stuff. But we understood what was written on the side of a bus. We knew that. We could understand that. That's where Brexit won. And these intricate arguments and education, it's all very interesting stuff, but quite frankly, I can only speak for myself.
That was your bottom line.
Yeah,
fair
absolutely.
Enough.
And I could not understand the implications and the detail involved. I mean, there's something, I can't remember the figure, James, perhaps you can inform me, the amount of things that we would have to come out of and renegotiate. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's going to tear a lot of things apart.
And it's also in direct contradiction to those 4 or 5 clips that I played a moment ago. They were saying the polar opposite of what's turned out to be true, and now they're saying that you voted for the opposite of what they told you would happen.
No, Tony Blair was right. We did not know what we was voting for. But he put it in the wrong way, because people like myself at that time, and people like myself, thought, well, how dare you patronise me? People still think it now.
I know they do.
They do.
I know they do. How do we break... I'm late for the news, but how do we...
He was right.
How would you have done that in a way... How could he have done that in a way that couldn't be? I don't think there is a way, because if they want to call it patronising, they will. But no one's patronising you. That's the point now.
Yeah, and that has to be put right.
And that can only be done by having another vote. I
think so, yeah, because people like myself who are now more well-informed and will look at the mess now, and that's just not from the Europeans, by the way. They're okay. They've done us okay.
Yes, they have.
It's our own parliament that's turning us over. And people see this and think, traitor. It's an easy word. It's a good word to use, isn't it?
Is.
It's a headline grabber. And those kind of words creep into the system. And that's what gets people's attention, who are of, like myself, admittedly, limited education. Really.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with the way you describe yourself, but even I'm not going to have an argument with you about your own description of yourself. All I would say is that it isn't a mark of education. You know, you're not a Wickhamist, are you, Warren? Because I think Jacob Rees-Mogg would consider that perhaps to be a reason why.
I'm not a patronising guy. I mean, what did he think about my? How would he judge?
God knows, mate. Where did you go? I'm hearing Dudley or thereabouts, but more towards Tipton, Wolverhampton. So you went to comprehensive school in Wolverhampton. Well, you're a typical Wolverhampton and they call us patronising and condescending, while claiming that if you went to Winchester, you're somehow a bad faith actor because you didn't go to Eton.
Yeah, too right. And I'm thinking, well, how dare you make a joke and laugh about that? And I mean, your Twitter feed this morning was excellent, and you know, with Piers Morgan and that guy who put this stuff up.
Yeah. I've got to go. I could listen to you all day, Warren. I'm sorry. I've got to go to the news. I'm a little late for the news. And, of course, the speech one very, very kindly refers to was at the People's Vote rally. And that odd exchange on Twitter this morning ended with him insisting that I was refusing to tell him whether or not I wanted a second referendum. Less than a fortnight ago, I opened the speeches at the People's Vote rally, refusing to answer whether or not you want a second referendum. And that is the brick wall in human form. Where the question is an odd one, really, about the second referendum, because I don't think anyone's a passionate advocate of it. Do you see what I mean? It's like being a passionate advocate of fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers are great, but I really wish we didn't need to use them. You see what I mean? Second referendum, when you speak to people like Warren, a lot of love, by the way, where I'm coming in for you, and I would add to it, you just sort of see it as one way, perhaps, of improving things. And I work on the presumption that things can't really get any worse. Although, given that I've dedicated a portion of the programme today to encouraging you to donate to Hope Not Hate so that they can send a former member of a Nazi group who helped foil a terror plot to murder an MP, so they can help send him into schools to teach young people about the dangers of falling for this claptrap, then perhaps I'm being very naive when I say I don't really think things could get any worse. We played a bunch of clips from people who were campaigning to leave, all of which have turned out not to be true, whether it was Liam Fox positing the notion that it would be somehow illegal to leave without a deal, that the EU wouldn't be allowed to do it. Michael Gove claiming that we would have a special status by dint of our former membership. We'd have full access to the single market, but be free from the regulation. David Davis claiming that maintaining access was much of the argument for leave. That's the most astonishing thing of all. David Davis saying that the fact that we can retain all of our access to these markets without changing the terms under which we trade, that is one of the major arguments for leaving. I agree, it was one of the major arguments for leaving, but it was false. Jacob Rees-Mogg claiming that Article 50 would prevent any economic shock in the event of us leaving the UK, now reassuring his followers by telling them that the shock would only last for 50 years. Anyway, here's someone from the other side.
The British public would be voting, if we leave, would be to leave the EU and leave the single market. We'd then have to negotiate a trade deal from outside with the European Union. Now, Canada is in the process of doing that. It's taken 7 years. And this is why I think there's a very real risk here of a lost decade for Britain.
Well, Cameron said a lost decade and you didn't believe him. Rees-Mogg says 50 years until things get better, and you go, yep, that's exactly what I voted for. And I can't unravel that level of sophistry. I just can't. I can just keep giving you the facts and the evidence. Mystery Hour coming up at 12. Happy days. 20 minutes to 12 is the time. A quick word to Dan in Essex, who sent in a text saying he'd just like to say that he didn't vote to leave for any of the reasons that we've been discussing today. He voted because the Lisbon Treaty will have essentially turned us into a member of the United States of Europe by 2022. Dan, that's not true, mate, and you know it, because that stuff on your Facebook feed about the Lisbon Treaty, that only started appearing about 2 months ago, and it's all lies. There's no way that you voted to leave the European Union in 2016 because of lies that appeared on your Facebook page in early 2019. Just Google Lisbon Treaty, or even just do fact check Facebook Lisbon Treaty, and you'll get all the information you need, and you'll be able to save yourself the embarrassment of claiming in public that you cast a vote in 2016 because of lies you were told in 2019. Bless. Malcolm's in Bournemouth. Malcolm, it's not ideal, but I can't think of anything better at the moment than going back to the people. A bit more democracy.
Yes, I'd agree with you. I think it's the least worst of all of the choices that we're presented with. But can I say that I think that we all have been lost in a deliberately created fog.
Yes.
And that deliberately created fog has been for political, maybe even sort of geopolitical reasons.
Yes.
You know, who is actually going to benefit from us leaving? Well, the answer is groups who want to manipulate and control us and set rules and agendas that apply in this country that I think we'll deeply regret. You know, the caller before the news, I applaud him enormously, but I realise that can sound condescending and patronising, and I certainly don't mean it like that.
I know it does, and that's why I hate it when people like, well, there's a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of love coming in for Warren. When he describes himself in those terms, it troubles me.
No, absolutely, but, you know, we have to look at the evidence. Who voted for Brexit? Generally speaking, people from less advantaged areas.
I'm disagreeing with everyone today, mate. You need to look at retired people in the southeast who'd already paid off their mortgages.
Yes, look, indeed. I live in the Bournemouth Pool Christchurch conurbation, as it's now become, on the coast, interestingly.
Right. Yeah.
And in Christchurch in particular, for example, very wealthy, has the longest longevity of anywhere in the country. People that have benefited from what I call the golden years after World War II. And they had this sort of mythical view that the 1950s were great. We know that wasn't true. And so the demographics are the people that, frankly, will not be here for too much longer. And so they're leaving a dreadful legacy to young people. And people that are actually going to be most seriously hit by any kind of exit from the European Union. And, you know, who's going to benefit from this? It's going to be the global players who want to see a weakened European Union, which I see globally as one of the few sort of bastions that still puts the people first. And the dangers of this, and again, I don't want to sound patronising, you know, I applaud the fact that you have made this connection. And that connection worries me. You know, I lived in Germany a long time. I find that most Germans are very able to look at their history. And I think it's just completely, well, disingenuous, I think is my favourite word at the moment, to sort of indicate that these are people that are trying to control us. On the European Parliament, we have more representation than most countries.
And we wield more power, and I'm going to run out of time, Malcolm. I'm not hurrying you unduly, but we've practically invented the single market. Margaret Thatcher Amanda has practically invented the single market, and now people who revere Margaret Thatcher are saying that we all wanted to leave it all along.
Yeah, and we could even throw Churchill into there.
I was about to, actually, oddly.
The basic need to keep peace.
Yes.
And it's done that. We've had a golden period in Europe, for which I'm very grateful. I've never known war in Europe. I've never been without food or shelter or a system that kind of looks after me, however inadequately it might be at times. The big issue for me is we have to address this burgeoning gulf between rich and poor.
Well, we're not going to be... I did warn you I was going to have to move on as the clock ticked, but you're right. And the burgeoning gulf, it's not between rich and poor. It's actually between the super rich and everybody else. I think the gaps between sort of the moderately well-off and the badly off are not growing. It's that... well, I get all Marxist about it. You'd say it's the capital class. It's the people who make more money by investing in your company than you do by working for it. It's 11:45. Mystery Hour around the corner, and I know we say this every week, but it will feel like a warm bath after the shenanigans of political conversations for the other 14 hours of the week that we spend together. Speaking of spending time together, Warren, I hope you're still listening up in Wigton. Beverly Knight's been in touch, which, if you're from Wolverhampton, like Warren is, that's practically royalty. She says, Warren was a great contributor just now. Big up black country folk who are up for changing their minds. So well done. Love you, Beth. It's 10 minutes to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Theo Usherwood is down by the House of Commons, and we're going to talk to him because I get complaints if we don't.
Mystery Hour starts 15 minutes early. What is going to happen with Brexit? James, we've got a little bit more clarity this morning because the Prime Minister's spokesman has said that when it comes to Yvette Cooper's bill that passed the Commons last night, is due to go into the early hours of the morning in the House of Lords before it receives royal assent from Her Majesty the Queen, probably sometime in the wee hours of tomorrow morning, that there is going to be a European Council next week, as we know, and they are going to determine the extension date and any conditions. Now, from what we understand, they could throw in the European Council perfectly feasibly, saying, we'll give you an extension, but we want to keep Gibraltar, for instance. That is one possibility. And that Theresa May has to accept what is agreed by the 27 other EU nations. It's not a negotiation. There isn't a back and forth between the Prime Minister and her team and the 27 others. And then what's going to happen, which is new, is there's going to be a vote on the Thursday on what has been agreed by the Prime Minister at the European Council on the Wednesday. And this is where the risk of a no-deal Brexit comes in, because it might be that the European Council places such severe demands on the British Parliament that Jeremy Corbyn can't whip in favour of it. Theresa May has no chance of whipping her MPs in favour of it, so it has to offer a free vote, and that then Parliament turns down the European Council offer, in which case at midnight on April the 12th we leave the European Union without a deal. That's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hang on, just give me a minute to cogitate everything you said, see if I've got any questions to come back with.
No, I mean... No.
Stop interrupting, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Hang on, all right. And then it goes there, and then that happens to do. Yeah, all right.
Some of your... Just only to add, some of your listeners might be asking, well, what's the date going to be in terms of what we're going to ask in terms of the extension itself? Are we going to say a year, 2 years? That's not really what the British government is. That's not top of the wish list for Theresa May. What she really wants is a guillotine, so that when meaningful vote 755 passes, I don't know, in December 2020, that is the moment of ratification, and that is the moment that we leave. So that's top of the wish list rather than the length of an extension. Now, that is highly unlikely to be granted by the 27 other presidents and premiers, prime ministers of the European Union, because that brings in such a degree of uncertainty into the European Parliament, because suddenly we're going to leave on a date which the British Parliament decides when it finally agrees to Theresa May's meaningful vote. They lose control. So that's probably going to go out the window. And of course, the Chancellor Philip Hammond was talking up the prospects of a guillotine last night, but it's not really very likely to happen.
No.
And so what is more likely to happen is that the European Council sets a number of stringent demands, which Jeremy Corbyn could well find very difficult to sign up to, given the pressures. A 2-year extension, 2.5-year extension.
Why would Corbyn find that hard to sign up to?
Because, as you know, Jeremy Corbyn has dilly-dallied between supporting a second referendum, between Remain and leaving the European Union. And what they are scared of within Labour, and I know there's a huge amount of debate about whether they should be scared of it, but the charge from the Conservatives that Labour have prevented or stopped Brexit.
It's astonishing, isn't it? None of them want to own it, but they all want to blame it on the other lot. So they're literally just playing hot potato. No, we don't want it, but when it fails, as we all kind of know it will, it's just a question of what flavour failure it's going to be. Yeah. We really want the blame to get pinned on the other lot.
Yeah, that's it. But that's a problem for Corbyn.
Yeah, I know.
And it's a problem for his MPs in Leave constituencies, because Corbyn, if it is a short extension, could quite possibly say, well, he could whip his MPs in favour of it. But the danger is that, such as the mood within the Conservative Party, you could end up with north of 220, 230 MPs voting against the motion. You could then end up with Corbyn either offering or claiming to put in a 3-line whip, but that whip actually turning into mere encouragement of his MPs to vote in favour of the motion. And you end up in this situation where it could well happen that we leave without a deal on
Yes, I'm glad you've reminded us of that, because, politically it moved out of reach with that vote in Parliament, but legally nothing changed at all. And so I don't know if are we affording too much significance to that one vote margin on that bill, because it doesn't matter what they pass or don't pass. Legally, we're still where we were before it was presented to the House.
That is correct, James.
Thank you, Theo.
That is correct, but there's nothing... Sorry. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm patronising. I'm not.
No, you don't. You just sound lovely.
I'm just sorry. I'm just trying to buy myself a bit of time to think about the next erudite thought that I'm going to come up with. But no, there's nothing there.
We'll keep an eye on things. Ring us back if you come up with an erudite thought. We're always pleased to hear them. Theo Usherwood there, talking us through the runners and riders. I have to tell you, I've kind of lost a little bit of faith in my own judgment, because on days like today I kind of think, why is everyone getting so worked up about that vote last night? It doesn't change anything. It just essentially changes the vocabulary we use when asking for things. It doesn't change the fact that the answer is going to come from elsewhere, and it might be no, but there we are. Misria, imminent. Ziad, before that, in Newport. Ziad, what would you like to say?
I just want... Well, thanks for taking my call first, James.
You're very welcome.
I just want to respond to your caller who was saying that Remain has to stay off the ballot paper if we are going to have a second referendum.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to add to his embarrassment, to be honest with you.
No, but it's... Well, I'm calling as somebody who voted Leave and has changed his mind. My reasons for voting to Leave were extremely narrow-minded. I felt, it was because I was struggling to recruit doctors from outside the European Union.
Really?
And I felt that having EU rights gave certain doctors the advantage when they turned up for interview, yet I had to jump through so many hoops to get them from outside the European Union if they were...
I don't think that's narrow-minded. That's quite a complex rationale, actually, if you'd allow me to say so.
But I felt afterwards that I was being used as a pawn for a much bigger political game, and I was extremely naive, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are like me and want a second chance. I mean, it's absurd that we can elect a government every 5 years, yet a life-changing decision like this is something that we are bound to...
Yes, I suppose, it's absurd to you, because you really are the person or the constituency to whom this will appear most urgent. You want the right to do what Jacob Rees-Mogg has done and change your vote, change your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
He, I believe, denies you or doesn't think you should be afforded that right. But of course, there are plenty of people who haven't changed their mind, who reject furiously the notion that well, in some ways, they reject the notion that you even exist. But I think we can probably push people claiming you're an actor who's been paid to ring in and make this point, all hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Yeah, well, you would say that. You would say that. We all saw you at RADA on the stage. So we can push those people to the side of the plate who would accuse you of not being real. But there are still plenty of people left on the plate who do really, really reject the idea that we should ask them again.
Which is fine. I mean, if we have a second referendum and Leave win again, then at least we're better informed. But
arguably better informed. Yeah, I hear you. Sorry to interrupt, but you're right. You will be better informed and I will be better informed. But if people are persuaded to vote for no deal, we'll just be resurrecting the weapons-grade misinformation anyway, because people will be able to describe no deal in whatever fanciful terms they please, in precisely the same way as we've proved beyond doubt this morning. They described leaving the European Union as impossibly involving no deal. So exactly the same people who said vote to leave, there's no way it would be no deal, would start campaigning saying vote for no deal, all these wonderful things will happen. And that is where we are. Some of us perhaps feel like the rest of the country is still chasing its tail. But then again, you speak to a Ziad or a Warren and you sort of think, well, don't they deserve the same rights as Rees-Mogg?